It's the 13th of December 2021. A brand new YouTube channel called Stark Future Official is posting their first video. The company bearing the same name just announced its entrance in the electric dirt bike market. Out of nowhere, the video explodes, gaining hundreds of thousands of views and crashing the company's website. This was a company nobody had heard of, and out of the blue, they polarized all discussions in the off-road space. So, what is Stark Future? Their origin story is fascinating, filled with obstacles and hurdles. This is the story of the Stark Varg. It all started in a small village in Sweden, the birthplace of the founder, Anton Vass. By the age of 10, his parents gifted him his first ever dirt bike. Anton became hooked on the sport, on the feeling. It influenced him so much, he decided to work towards becoming a motorcycle mechanic. But he didn't get to do that for long, as after a few months of working in the field, Anton was going to take on a job that would change his entire career. In 2009, Stefan Ron and Daniel Pettersen launched a small motorcycle online retail store called 24MX. The Swedish operation grew quickly, and they were in need of help. And so, they co-opted 16-year-old Anton, and he became 24MX's first employee. And that's a job role that wouldn't last for long, as soon after, Anton became partner in the business, and is considered up to this day a co-founder of the retail giant. Technically, Anton didn't found the store, but it's also not that far off. The company was growing quickly, and Anton was too. By the time he was 20, he was in charge of the commercial side of 24MX, negotiating deals with other 60-year-old managers from different part suppliers. The motorcycle business grew even further, launching XL Moto and Sled Store, two other related e-commerce businesses. And they blew up as well. 24MX, from its humble garage beginnings, turned into the world's biggest online retailer of bike parts and accessories. To give you a better idea of their size, the team wanted to become a common name in the sport, and instead of paying huge amounts of sponsorship money, they noticed that every single motocross event had a plethora of racing tents. And that gave them an idea. They went and developed their own and priced it competitively, and people bought them. They sold 1,200 units in their first year, to 9,500 the next, and went all the way to 100,000 race tents every year. For reference, 24MX became the world's third biggest manufacturer of race tents. And they did the same with their gear bag. They created good quality products at low prices, and somehow still managed to make a profit out of them. Business was booming, but any good story has to come to an end. 24MX's didn't. But Anton's stint at the company had ended. He wanted to do something different and quit his role inside the company. Now, the story is about Stark, so what does 24MX have to do with it? Well, I'd argue that without his retail store experience, Stark wouldn't be here today. You see, Anton not only gained business experience from this, but crucially, he gained deep relationships with parts suppliers. And this is why the 24MX story is so important. Now, when he left the company, the Swede didn't go on to found Stark. In fact, he didn't know what he was going to do, and that was a bit frightening. Not because of money, but because of habit. He went on to start 5 other companies, 2 e-commerce ones and the real estate business being one of them. Anton needed to work on something, it's just he hadn't exactly found what that thing is. And one day, that all changed. Anton had been fascinated by RC cars as a kid, and as he became an adult, his fascination changed to the rise of Tesla and electric cars. And the light bulb turned on when Anton took a deep look into Alta. After witnessing the demise of the American company, he was left with a question. If Alta wasn't pushing the boundaries of electric dirt bikes, who was? And the answer was nobody. And that's when the Stark idea came into play. The motivation was simple: to build a dirt bike that's sustainable and environmentally friendly while also creating an exciting product. But he was smart. He realized that If transforming the industry was indeed going to be the goal, his product didn't just have to be the best electric one. It would have to be the best dirt bike on sale. Simply waving the eco flag was not going to work. And so, in 2019, Anton co-opted Paul Saucy, and he became the co-founder and CTO of what was going to become Stark Future. Anton had the relationships and business experience, while Paul had an extensive design and engineering background. It looked like a match made in heaven.
Okay, so you have an idea, but where do you start? First, they decided on their first product being a motocross bike. On one hand, it is one of the most demanding sports in the two-wheeled world, so if you could build a product to withstand that type of abuse, you can build almost anything else.
But second, crucially, a motocross bike would make their life easier. Look, MX bikes don't need street homologations, they don't need plates, so this allowed them to iterate and go to market quicker, bypassing the bureaucracy of registering motorcycles for street use. At the start, they were designing everything in-house, but outsourced the manufacturing of their initial prototypes to CNC machinists and 3D printing companies. And from the very beginning, they took the best gas bikes on the market as the benchmark.
We carefully tested and analyzed the current best performing motocross bikes on the market.
They bought and measured chassis flags on their competitors to see what they were doing and why. And they didn't stop their innovation at electrification. They looked into every detail that could make for a better owner experience. Like creating a new chain adjuster, easy to mount foot pegs or proper triple clamps. It took the Swedes 2.5 years from the first phone call to Paul to having a functional, ready-to-ride prototype. And with it, the only thing left was to show it to everyone else.
And so, we get back to the 13th of December 2021. There was no previous announcement, no hype.
Their Facebook page didn't even exist before this date. They went onto YouTube, uploaded their 16-minute reveal video, and waited. But they didn't have to wait long. The video skyrocketed in popularity instantly and pre-orders exploded. They received 850 motorcycle reservations worth 100 euros each
within the first 24 hours. The interest was so high that
out of those 24 hours, the website was only operational for 6 of them.
At one point, they were pre-selling 2 Vargs every minute, and the hype continued into the week, them gathering over 5,000 unit reservations.
Sure, co-opting Josh Hill and Sebastian Tortelli as part of their test rider team helped, but remember, nobody knew what Stark was. They didn't exist. This has to be the greatest motorcycle launch of all time. The only thing that made them boom was their product, the Varg. At launch, the price was set at $11,900 US.
30% higher peak power than the fastest 450 today. This is the motocross with the highest power-to-weight ratio on the planet.
It promised to come with 80 horsepower and 938 Newton meters of torque, and all of that would be customizable for their dashboard. The chassis was a mix of aluminium, magnesium and carbon fiber, which allowed them to reach an amazing weight of just 110 kilos. This was going to be the world's most powerful motocross bike by a country mile. And their alleged range was also decent, them equating it to a full tank of gas in a 450.
Sure, that's not a lot, but it's workable. And what really set them apart from other startups, the Varg was a full-fledged dirt bike.
It wasn't a toy like the Cake or Surans of this world. This looked production-ready, with a sleek, modern design to complete the package. The emissions and environment side of things were barely mentioned, because they knew that the public didn't really care that much. Environmentalists and motocross riders don't overlap that much, but focusing on their performance was the key to the hearts of the people. And then, they also said their deliveries would start as early as September 2022, less than a year from the announcement. And this is where things started to go a bit south. As soon as early 2022, Anton came out with a statement saying that deliveries would have to be delayed because of supply chain issues.
And during that year, the doubters were growing louder and louder.
People were starting to question Stark's claims, from their range to quality to whether they'd ever even deliver any motorcycles. Stark was a great unknown, and as the hype was returning back to normal, questions started piling up. In reality, Stark was in trouble.
Not even in their wildest dreams could they anticipate such demand, and that's when the issues started piling up.
They went on to open a 20,000 square meter factory near Barcelona, but getting the parts was still proving to be problematic. You see, at that moment, Stark didn't just have to build a dirt bike, but they also had to build the facilities to accommodate a large production run at the same time. In a way, Stark launched their Varg at the worst possible moment. The supply chains were already stretched after the pandemic and hadn't recovered. Add to that the conflict from Ukraine and it was a recipe for disaster. Yet somehow, in 2023, the first Vargs managed to slowly drip into customers' hands. And they weren't perfect. Typical first model issues affected some of these Vargs, but at the end of the day, these issues were small enough that people could glance over. And as soon as enthusiasts started riding their Vargs, the doubters started to be silenced.
Love it or hate it, you can't deny the fact that the Stark Varg was a huge success, loved by many enthusiasts.
At this point, Anton had a worry. After seeing the success of the Varg, it was only a matter of time until other legacy manufacturers were to come out with their own electric competitors.
As days gone by, then weeks, months, yet nothing. The industry had no response to the Varg.
And that's when Anton realized. If the big dogs didn't have a response then, it meant they had nothing. So effectively, Stark had no direct competition, and in a way, it still doesn't. This little startup caught everyone napping, and by the time they were set up and ready, the rest of the industry was many years behind.
With that being said, it was never all sunshine and rainbows. Remember the saying, win on Sunday, sell on Monday? Stark took that seriously, and in 2023, they wanted to take on an enormous challenge.
Racing the World Super Enduro Championship. This had never been attempted before with an electric machine, so they had to do their homework properly. First, Stark looked closely at the FIM regulations, and once they decided that it was possible to hit all the bullet points, Anton officially submitted the registration papers to the FIM. And not far after, they received an official confirmation. Stark was going to race in Super Enduro against gas-powered motorcycles.
Little did they know, it was never going to be so easy.
Well, let me tell you this thing. If I'm on board and I'm an enduro rider, I will leave it to the fans to connect the dots.
As soon as Stark got their confirmation, they went on to sign Tadej Blazusiak as their official factory rider. They built a dedicated race team, costing them multiple hundreds of thousands of euros. They modified their Varg to make sure it passed all the FIM regulations, from adding lights and safety features to the motorcycles.
Through all the points that we were supposed to go to make sure that everything was on point, it was done the way it should have been done, and everything was approved.
Fast forward to the end of 2023, the first stage of the championship was going to take place in Liévin, France, and the Stark team were ready. Spectators were excited to see what could an all-electric platform do against the traditional gas bikes. The team lined up for the final technical inspection, and
there was a problem. A big one. Less than a day before the competition, the FIM issued a last-minute change in regulations. One that Stark was never going to pass.
From what I found, this new rule stated that, in principle, it is forbidden for different categories, groups and classes to compete in the same race, unless supplementary regulations state otherwise. The Varg, according to the FIM, was in a different category than all others. In a nutshell, the FIM banned the Varg from competing because it wasn't burning gas.
Which, you have to admit, is a bit ironic when you think that Super Enduro takes place inside indoor arenas.
But look, I hear you. It's for safety, right? What if it catches fire and the marshals can't extinguish it? The FIM later stated that they were worried the Stark posed a fire hazard and that the organizers weren't ready for such eventuality. They were also worried of the possibility of electric shocks. And fine, I get that. But if the Varg really was that dangerous, why were they allowed to run exhibition laps during that same weekend?
And I would understand this decision if the FIM didn't see it coming. If Stark had come out a few days before wanting to sign up, I get it. But over the previous year, The startup's engineers had been in constant contact with the FIM, making sure they were doing everything right.
On that day, the Stark team tried everything to be allowed to race, proposed every solution on planet Earth, yet it was not enough.
Now, I don't want to go into conspiracy theories. I'm not going to say that the FIM had hidden reasons. What I will say though is this.
Yes, the FIM had previous bad experiences with electric bikes, when a Moto E machine burned down the entire paddock a few years before. But they knew about Stark all along. This wasn't new. They could have said no many months before, yet they didn't. Meanwhile, the Motorcycle Sports Manufacturers Association, a group representing the brands competing within various FIM championships, initially refused Stark's entry to the group.
So basically, the rules regarding electric motorcycles were influenced by a group of manufacturers that weren't producing any meaningful electric motorcycles. I guess it's up to you to draw your own conclusions.
As far as racing goes, the Swedish-origined and Spanish-based company did have some early success in local competitions, like winning the UK Arena Cross Championship. But then, whenever they tried to go further, they kept hitting brick walls. They tried to enter MXGP to compete against the best gas bikes on the market.
Yet again, the FIM refused. In fact, the FIM did something else.
In March 2024, they announced a new all-electric support class for MXGP. That sounds great, right? Not exactly. From the get-go, Stark was clearly against this. And I can see why. Look, separate classes make sense in MotoGP, where the lap time delta between machines can be as much as 10 seconds. But in off-road, that delta isn't there. Electrics can be just as fast. And at that point, the class would be Starks versus other Starks. They would only compete against themselves, so why bother?
At least things have gone better for the current season of Super Enduro, right? The FIM changed the rules again, allowing Stark to compete against the gas counterparts. Finally, justice has been served.
Except, in order to make sure racing stayed balanced, the FIM added some electric-only technical regulations. They imposed a minimum weight of 123 kilos for these machines, which...
I mean, a stock KTM 350 weighs 122 assuming a full tank of gas, which makes no sense to run. In reality, a 350 can easily run 10 kilos lighter.
Then they also limited the Stark's power output to just 55 horsepower.
Is this fair, is it not? I'll let you decide. But what they added next can't possibly be considered fair.
According to their rules, the FIM will also impose a torque limit to electric machines. The problem is, that limit is yet to be announced, and we're a month away from the season start.
And even worse, within the rulebook, the FIM explicitly allowed themselves
to change these rules on the fly without any notice if they considered the field to be too unbalanced. Stark wasn't happy, but it was all they could get. And something is better than nothing, so this year, in 2024, Eddie Carlson and Taddy will line up in the Super Enduro World Championship.
And this is huge, because this is the first time ever when an all-electric machine will race directly against its gas counterparts at the top level, a world championship level.
Reading through this story kind of reminded me of another one, and that's Alta's story. In so many ways, they match perfectly. And let me remind you, things didn't exactly end well for Alta. The Americans proved that building a proper, capable electric bike was possible. Their product was never bad, and that's not why they failed. They took a similar approach with Stark by placing their product as a performance-oriented one, not an environmental response. Just as Stark, they did have a great powertrain for their time. Go watch Fortnite's video on Alta if you want a deeper dive into that, but long story short, Alta sold 1,000 units and suddenly went bankrupt. In an alleged shady deal with Harley, the legacy manufacturer managed to strangle Alta in a takeover acquisition, and they bled them dry. Alta never failed because of its product.
The thing is, the Alta story is, in a way, a classic one of engineers trying to build a company. And we've seen time and time again that that's simply not enough.
Just look at a bunch of similar videos on this channel, from Highland to Husaberg. History has proved that an engineering team by themselves can't survive in the two-wheeled corporate world. And that's why Stark is different. First things first, Anton's already got plenty of experience working in the corporate world of motorcycles. He's not new at this. Second, remember the 24MX story? Stark is in a great position to have contact with partners because these relationships were established long before they were even a company. And in a way, I think Anton put it best. If you launch a bike in a space with virtually no competition and when it's sometimes even better than its gas counterparts, the only way you can fail as a company is internally. You see, Alta died because of bad internal decisions regarding their finances. Meanwhile, Stark looks different. At the end of 2022, the Iker Group acquired a 10.35% stake in the company in exchange for paying 50 million euros.
If you don't know, the Iker Group is the umbrella company behind Royal Enfield. To give you some perspective on how much positive sentiment that's sent into the market regarding this up-and-coming startup,
this investment would give Stark a valuation of roughly 483 million euro. During those times, the market cap of the entire Pirer Group, owners of KTM, Husky, GasGas and others, was around 2 billion euro, just 4 times bigger. And in fact, looking at it now, that market cap dropped to just 350 million. Less than Stark's valuation was. Take another one, the entire Piaggio Group had a market cap of 1 billion euro around that same time.
And one of these is a startup, the others are big, established conglomerates. Before we jump to my throat, I know that valuations and market caps aren't exactly the same thing. I also know that some of these companies may be overvalued, some might be undervalued. That's not the point. No matter how you put it, the trust everyone was giving Stark was immense.
And that trust continued, with the company getting access to credit facilities from Santander, Big Bets, and even the European Investment Bank. Stark managed to get access to 85 million euro worth of credit in order to facilitate their expansion. And it seems like it's going well, since as of June 2024, they reached their first month of profits.
Well, not quite. Technically, these profits are before taxes, interest, and a few other factors. Still, the point is, they seem to know what they're doing, which, in a graveyard filled to the brim with up-and-coming motorcycle companies, gives them hope.
Maybe this one will actually get to live. To close this up, Anton never wanted to stop at dirt bikes. He envisions a future where Stark produces street-oriented models too, but most importantly, he seems like someone open to suggestions. For example, he stated that he didn't think his bikes needed a clutch. Controversial, I know. But he also said that if there will be situations where a clutch will be needed, he wouldn't be against adding one either. And that's just one example. Yes, they have a vision, but
they're not stubborn in pursuing that vision. And in a world that is so divided, this has to be appreciated. I hope you appreciated the story of Stark Future. I definitely enjoyed researching it. Make sure to check out these other videos, subscribe if you liked it, and see you next time. Have a good one. Bye.